Welcome to Wealth Hustle 247 podcast, your trusted guide to financial literacy, business innovation, and entrepreneurial success. Learn how to grow your wealth, make informed decisions, and turn your ideas into profitable ventures.
Most people don't lose money because they're broke, they lose because they lack financial IQ. In this video, discover how the liquidity trap silently destroys portfolios and why smart investors think differently during economic uncertainty. Your portfolio growth starts with how you think, not how much you earn.
Imagine, just sitting there looking at your W-2 and realizing you just handed like 40% of your hard-earned paycheck straight over to the government.
Yeah, that is a painful moment for sure.
Right. And meanwhile, the person who actually owns the corporate building you work in, they legally paid zero in taxes.
Zero. Which just sounds completely wrong to most people.
It does. But our source material today basically argues that, well, this isn't some weird glitch in the tax code. It's the financial system explicitly rewarding them and, frankly, punishing you.
It really completely upends that whole traditional narrative,
Yeah.
What about working hard and saving your pennies?
Oh, absolutely. So we are taking a deep dive today into a framework called the Asset Empire Philosophy.
And the core thesis here is incredibly blunt. They argue that the traditional school system is basically a factory.
A factory for what?
Well, they call them church mice.
Church mice. Wow.
Yeah, people conditioned to trade their finite time for this false sense of job security, all while, and the source emphasizes this heavily, the government prints $1 trillion in fake money every 90 days.
$1 trillion of fiat currency. And that brings us to the mission for this deep dive. Because if you are currently working hard for a paycheck and just hoping that little savings account will eventually make you rich, this text says you might have some, quote, screws loose.
Which is aggressive, I know.
Very aggressive. But we want to unpack this framework today and decode the exact blueprint this source provides for building a passive income portfolio.
Right, because the stated end game here is reaching a point where you literally never need a paycheck again.
Exactly. But before we get into the actual mechanics, I think we need to set some ground rules for this discussion.
Yeah, that's crucial. Because we are looking at a highly controversial, very aggressive financial worldview here.
We are.
Especially regarding its claims about, global money printing and the banking system. So just to be clear, we aren't endorsing these strategies.
Right. And we are definitely not giving you financial advice.
Absolutely not. Our objective is strictly to extract the mechanics of this philosophy impartially. We just want to see exactly how these gears turn.
Okay, so let's start with section 1. Redefining the rules, or what the source calls the language of money.
Because before you can build this portfolio, you literally have to change how you define wealth.
Right. I mean, we all know the traditional accounting definitions. Your CPA takes your primary residence, puts it in the asset column on your balance sheet, and you feel great about it.
You feel like you're building wealth.
Exactly. But this framework just ruthlessly redefines things based purely on cash flow. It says an asset puts money into your pocket. A liability takes money out. Full stop.
It is a very uncomfortable reality check for most people.
Oh, totally. Because society and, well, definitely the real estate industry conditions you to look at the invisible equity trapped inside your walls and call that wealth.
Right. You buy a house for $300,000. The market says it's worth $400,000, and you suddenly feel $100,000 richer.
But you aren't. This model demands that you ignore that perceived equity entirely. The only question that matters is this object putting physical dollars into your bank account this month, or is it draining them?
And that leads to the biggest pill to swallow in this whole text, which is
that your personal home is a liability.
a massive liability.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because most people view their house as a piggy bank, right? But the source is basically arguing it's actually more like a pet you constantly have to feed.
That is a great analogy, yeah.
I mean, it bleeds cash every month for the mortgage, the property taxes, the broken water heater, and if you stop feeding it cash, the bank just takes it away. So I have to ask, how hard is it for the average person to actually rewire their thought engine away from what their real estate agent has told them their whole life?
What's fascinating here is the sheer psychological friction this creates. It is incredibly difficult.
I bet.
But the text argues you absolutely have to shift your focus entirely out of the earned income column. You have to stop trying to just increase your hourly wage.
And start focusing on what?
Obsessively acquiring entities that generate independent cash flow. We're talking rental real estate, businesses, dividend-paying stocks.
Okay, so that perfectly transitions us into the next phase, choosing your battlefield. If your own house isn't the golden ticket, where do you actually put your money?
The blueprint categorizes 4 main asset classes of the rich. You have businesses, real estate, paper assets like dividends, and commodities.
Like gold, silver, and oil, right?
Exactly. But the source gives this very specific rule. You have to invest in what you love.
See, that sounds a little bit like a motivational poster to me.
I know, it really does. But there's a highly mechanical reason for it. It's purely about stamina.
Stamina.
Yeah. Because to succeed in any of these, you have to study the numbers relentlessly. I mean, if you find commercial real estate zoning laws incredibly boring, you are not going to do the necessary due diligence on a Saturday night.
Ah, right. You have to be interested enough to push through the tedious stuff.
Exactly. The technical education required to actually manipulate the value of these assets is huge.
And speaking of manipulating value, let's look at how that actually works, because this is where the math in the text gets wild.
Oh, the Ken McElroy anecdote.
Yes. So the story goes, this real estate investor, Ken McElroy, buys a multi-unit rental property, and all he does is add washing machines and dryers to the units.
He didn't rebuild the complex or anything.
No, he just added basic appliances. And the text claims that somehow exploded the property's overall value.
And this perfectly illustrates the fundamental difference between hoping a market goes up, which is just speculation,
Right.
and actually forcing the value up through operations. It's about creating value.
Walk me through the mechanics of that.
Sure. Let's break it down. By adding the washer and dryer, he can legally charge, say, an extra $50 a month in rent per unit.
Okay, $50.
If there are 100 units, that's $5,000 extra a month, or $60,000 a year in new net operating income, which is called NOI.
Okay, 60 grand in extra rent is definitely nice. But how does that explode the property value?
Because commercial real estate isn't valued based on comparable neighborhood sales like your personal home is.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's valued based on a multiplier of the income it generates. This is known as a capitalization rate, or cap rate.
Okay, so how does the math work there?
Let's say the market cap rate is 6%. To find the new value you just created, you divide that new $60,000 of NOI by 0.06.
Wait, let me do the math.
That $60,000 in annual rent just forced the total value of the building up by $1 million.
Wait, really? $1 million from washers and dryers?
Exactly. He didn't just park his money and wait for appreciation. He manufactured $1 million in equity out of thin air just by understanding the math of NOI.
But if I'm researching NOI and sourcing commercial appliances and coordinating installation crews into 100 units, I gotta push back here. Isn't this just a second job in disguise? That doesn't sound very passive.
Well, the text isn't advocating for absolute laziness from day one. The contrast is in the nature of the transaction. When you work a W-2 job, the transaction is linear. You trade 1 hour of your life for 1 hour of pay. If you stop working, the money halts instantly.
Right, you're off the clock. The pay stops.
Exactly. But the effort put into those washing machines, that was intense, upfront, strategic work. Once they are installed, though, they yield recurring cash flow every single month.
Okay, I see. The effort is decoupled from the time spent. You do the heavy lifting once to build a machine that runs indefinitely.
You're building a cash flow machine. But of course, engines require fuel.
Right. Buying a 100-unit apartment complex requires a mountain of capital, which brings us right into the psychological barrier of funding.
The mindset shift here is brutal, but necessary.
The text argues that simply uttering the phrase, "I can't afford it," actually shuts down your brain. Like, it completely closes the door.
It does. The source insists you have to ask, how can I afford it, to trigger your creative potential.
And that creative potential usually leads straight to what the 0.1% use, which is OPM, other people's money.
And the claim here is going to make some people mad. The source literally says only lazy people use their own money.
Which is just a huge slap in the face to anyone who has been diligently saving for, like, a 20% down payment.
It's totally designed to be provocative. But the underlying premise is that spending your own savings requires zero financial intelligence.
Because anybody can just drain a bank account.
Right. But raising capital, convincing a bank to underwrite a loan, and utilizing debt as an instrument of growth, That requires immense financial IQ.
Here's where it gets really interesting. They anchor this entire philosophy of debt in a historical event from 1971.
Yes, when the dollar was taken off the gold standard.
Right. The argument is that currency stopped being real money and fundamentally became an instrument of debt. Fake money.
And because fiat currency is designed to inflate constantly over time, the text draws a hard line. Debtors are the winners and savers are the losers.
We have to explain why that happens, because to the average person, that sounds totally counterintuitive. We're taught to save.
Let's break it down. Because fiat currency inflates, the real value of your fixed-rate debt actually drops over time.
Okay, so if I borrow $1 million today at a fixed interest rate and inflation runs at, say, 5% a year.
The actual purchasing power of the money you owe is shrinking every single year. Your debt is literally melting away.
Wow. Meanwhile, the apartment building I bought with that debt is rising with inflation, and so is the rent I'm charging my tenants.
Exactly. The system inherently transfers wealth from the people saving the currency to the people borrowing it to buy hard assets.
The tenant pays off the loan for you, and you keep the profit.
It's brilliant mechanics.
But we are taught that debt is this heavy backpack pulling you underwater. But this source treats debt almost like a controlled burn in a forest.
A controlled burn. I like that.
Like, it's incredibly dangerous if you don't know what you're doing, but it's totally essential for growth. Is this strategy just inherently risky, though?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the source makes a stark difference between consumer debt, which is bad debt, and leveraged cash-flowing debt, which is good debt.
Bad debt being like putting a vacation on a high-interest credit card.
Exactly. That's a liability. But good debt is using a loan to buy an asset that pays for itself. Navigating that difference is why they view this as an indicator of true intelligence.
Okay, so you are successfully using good debt, you're acquiring assets, and your income is growing. But the source points out a new villain here.
Taxes.
Taxes. They say it's your single largest expense.
By far. Earned income is taxed at the highest rates, often 40 to 60%.
But passive income can be taxed as low as 0%, which leads to a really pointed question for anyone listening. To the average person working a 9-to-5 paying 0% in taxes sounds like a completely shady loophole. Is the source basically telling us to game the system?
Not at all. And this is a huge paradigm shift. The source frames these not as loopholes, but as intentional government design.
Intentional? Why would the government want that?
Because the government needs private citizens to build housing and create jobs. They aren't good at doing it themselves.
Ah, so they use the tax code to incentivize producers.
Right. They offer enormous tax breaks, the biggest one being depreciation, because you are providing a service the community needs.
So it's not tax evasion, it's tax strategy.
Exactly. And that leads to the concept of the velocity of money.
Oh, this is fascinating.
You use good debt, and you reinvest that tax-free cash flow to acquire even more assets without paying unnecessary taxes. You just keep the money moving.
Which builds massive wealth. But the source explicitly states you cannot build this asset empire alone. You can't just be a lone wolf.
No. If you try to be a solopreneur here, you're going to get crushed.
You need a team. We're talking CPAs and attorneys who actually talk to each other.
And why do you need them? To protect you from the litigation lottery.
The litigation lottery, meaning as soon as you have visible wealth, people try to sue you for it.
Oh, totally.
Oh.
Someone slips on the sidewalk at your apartment building, and suddenly they want your entire portfolio. You need a legal fortress.
So what does this all mean for you as the investor? It's like going from being a solo runner on a track to being the manager of an F1 pit crew. It's a totally different skill set.
That's spot on. Your financial statement becomes your real-world report card.
Right, because bankers will only give you money if they see you have the financial IQ to manage this team and this portfolio.
True financial independence isn't about knowing all the answers yourself. It's about synthesizing the expertise of others.
And the final mandate the source gives is that you have to stop being a spectator. You can't be terrified of making mistakes.
You have to act like a player willing to fail forward.
Fail forward. I love that. So, to recap this massive journey we just went on,
It's been a lot.
we've gone from relying on a paycheck and being a church mouse to understanding other people's money, good debt, and building a team to escape the litigation lottery. It requires completely leaving your comfort zone.
It really does. It flips everything upside down.
So to wrap this deep dive up, I know you had a final thought you wanted to leave everyone with.
I do, and this is something to really mull over.
Yeah.
The source claims that debtors are winners, savers are losers, and the ultimate goal is to never need a paycheck again.
Right.
But what happens to the broader economy if everyone actually successfully adopts this exact philosophy?
Oh, wow.
Think about it. If everyone becomes a real estate investor or business owner living off passive income, who's actually left to do the daily earned income jobs that keep society functioning?
If everyone is managing the portfolio, who is pouring the coffee and fixing the power lines, that is a wild paradox to think about.
It really is.
Well, thank you all for joining us on this deep dive today. Keep questioning the rules, keep studying the language of money, and we will catch you next time.
That's it for today's episode of Wealth Hustle 247. Be sure to follow, like, comment, and share with others. Keep pushing toward your goals, and we'll see you in the next episode.